Hey guys, Shane McMurray from the Wedding Report. In this episode, I meet with Paul. He is a wedding officiant and owner of Novo Concierge Pastors. They are an officiant company located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Check it out. Paul, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Tell me about your business. Tell me what you do, where you're located. Give me your website address, Instagram account, Facebook, all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, thanks, first of all, Shane, for having me on. My name is Paul Martinez, and my company is Novo Concierge Pastors, and you can find us at www.theconciergepastors.com, or if you go on Facebook or Instagram, you can find us under Denovo, Denovo, Concierge Pastors. That's our Instagram and Facebook handle. So I am a wedding officiant. I have been a pastor for probably almost 30 years now, but in these past 5 years or so, started a nonprofit to be able to specifically focus on officiating weddings, doing pre-marriage coaching, and everything that surrounds that.
Yeah, that's great. So pre-marriage coaching, let's talk about that a little bit. What is that? What does that mean for someone that's getting, as a pastor, you probably get people come to you, talk to you about getting married, things like that. But let's say they've gotten engaged, they contact you. What does the pre-marriage conversations and things look like?
Well, here's kind of how it starts. There was an assessment that was created by relationship psychologists and counselors, and it's actually entitled SYMBIS, Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. And so I'm a certified SYMBIS facilitator, and again, just with my background as having done pre-marriage coursework for couples for many years, the couple would take an online assessment, and then it produces about a 15, 16-page report, and it deals with everything in relationships. Communication, conflict resolution, all of the big things that couples have to deal with, in-laws and finances and sex and blended families, everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so then my wife and I sit down and we spend several hours walking through this report, unpacking it with this couple so we can help them see if there's any flags or anything that they need to kind of walk through. Because we're certified facilitators, we can help them walk through that process. So it becomes something pretty powerful, a great tool, because it not only helps them certainly as they are preparing for the wedding day, but also to build a long-term healthy marriage.
Yeah, which is really what it's all about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so how do most of your couples come to you? How do they find you? Is it referrals? They find you online?
We have some that find us online, but quite honestly, most come through referrals. Probably 75% through other vendors, and probably 24% through other couples that we've already done the services for. We've worked really hard to build that part of our business, so to speak, the word of mouth referral. I know that every vendor has their own preferences and styles, but what we try to do is work to be in the top one or two referred vendors for everybody, every photographer, venue, florist, wedding planner, etc. Right. So yeah, we do get a lot of word of mouth.
That's great. So you spent a bunch of time building relationships with other vendors in the space. All the ones you mentioned, right? And that's great. So what does the process look like? So let's say someone referred me to you, I contact you. Do I get the pre-marriage thing? Is that part of it, or is it just like, hey, we want you to officiate our wedding? Here's, what does the thing look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because sometimes we often get a lot of couples that are sort of contacting us and ask almost those same exact questions. We do have several packages. So we have an elopement style package, what we call our classic package, which is our rehearsal wedding package, everything involved there. And then we have our premier package, which includes the pre-marriage coaching. So they can kind of jump in at whatever level or whatever their need is. But usually when I'm contacted, and again, whether it's by phone or email, whatever, online, social media, we love to sit down and just connect with a couple for coffee. You'll hear me say we a lot. My wife often sits with me as we connect with couples. She's what I call both the beauty and the brains behind the operation. But what ends up happening is we just want to get to know that couple. That to me is one of the most important things, because it allows me to be able to craft and create a wedding ceremony that's going to be what they are looking for, what they're hoping for.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about elopement package. That's basically someone that's just trying to get married real fast and, have a very small wedding.
Yeah.
Let's talk about budget. So if I want to do the elopement, what are we looking at budget wise for the classic one, and then for the premier? What do they cost?
Sure. So kind of with the elopement, it kind of covers two things. Sometimes we'll get people who are just wanting to get married, but for some reason, let's say a justice of the peace is not available or something, but they just want to meet me at a local park, or here in Albuquerque, we have beautiful mountains, foothill trails, or even up in Santa Fe and Taos area, we've done elopement ceremonies where people have just flown in for a weekend and they're just getting married. So that package is usually about $150. And I say about because sometimes, depending upon if there's travel involved to different parts of the state, we'll travel.
Yeah, because Taos is quite a ways from Albuquerque.
Taos is about 3 hours away. So with our classic package, what we offer is direction at the rehearsal. We offer, of course, definitely officiating the wedding, and then helping them through the process, from letting them know where to get the marriage license. After the wedding, we can securely process and get the license back to the county for them. Anything in between, unlimited access to me. So that classic package is $500. Okay. And then when you add the pre-marriage coaching on, you'll still get everything with the classic package, plus the online assessment and several hours of pre-marriage coaching. And so that's $1,500. So we kind of have different levels depending upon what somebody's looking for. We don't require the pre-marriage, but we obviously recommend it because we believe in the value of it.
Yeah, for sure, right? So what about people that aren't necessarily, I mean, you're a pastor. Do you care if they're denominational, non-denominational? Are there any of those requirements for you?
That's a great question. And no, we don't care. Sometimes there will be people that will be getting married and they'll ask me, do you do sort of interdenominational weddings? There's a big Catholic population here in New Mexico. And so sometimes a person who is Catholic might be marrying a non-Catholic or something like that, or maybe somebody, who grew up in a Baptist denomination or whatever that is. So no, we don't have any requirements that way. In fact, that was one of the reasons we set this up. Having been a pastor at churches, you are typically connected into that denomination or that church's sort of set of rules and regulations, and that's great. But what we wanted to do is be able to connect with people who might not necessarily be attached to a pastor, a church, or somebody. So we end up finding there are a lot of people in that in-between space that need an officiant, and so we're able to provide those services.
Yeah, that's great. So let's say we hire you for anything, one of the packages, maybe the classic package. What does the process look like? So when we meet with you, do we sign a contract and is that what happens? And then we start working from there. Tell me what that process looks like.
Sure. No, that's a great question. We start off with a consultation. It's just all included, so we don't charge extra for that. And that's usually about a 45-minute to hour-long just connection. My first question that I ask every couple is, how did you meet? How did you fall in love? How did you get to this point where you want to choose to marry each other and spend the rest of your life together? there are a lot of details in weddings. We need to obviously know dates and venues and the size of wedding, etc. But
Yeah.
to me, the most important thing is the couple's love story, because that to me is what I am. I want to be able to share their love story with their family, friends, their loved ones on that wedding day during that ceremony. So after we meet and they put down a retainer, sign the contract, then as we move forward throughout the process, I continue to stay in touch with them. I'll send emails to ask follow-up questions
Yeah.
because I always like to know their story. And then if you were to go fast forward to the wedding date itself, you could kind of back it up, and about 2 weeks before the ceremony, I'll call them to make sure all the details are finalized. A month before the ceremony, I'll call them, and that way, if there's any remaining balance that's due, I can take care of that, or also just find out what happens. Sometimes couples will book us 8 to 12 months in advance, so I want to stay in contact all throughout the process. And because I want them to have access to me, I'll meet with them as often as they'd like, text, email, call as often as they like. So we have no stipulations that way. I've met with some couples 5 or 6 times from the first meeting to the wedding, and I've met with some couples once. So it's all at their comfort level.
Yeah, it all depends, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. So you talked earlier about the pre-marriage counseling thing. They take the survey. You guys go through. What is that? Is it a one-time meeting? Is it a multi-meeting thing? What is that?
Again, that's something that we break down to how that couple wants to connect. It's usually a process. The entire process is about 6 hours. So if a couple wants to meet for 6 one-hour sessions, or if they want to break it up into a couple of different blocks, we'll do that. And we're flexible. We meet on nights, weekends,
Gotcha.
during the day. So we just kind of do it again at their level, but it usually ends up being about 6+ hours of pre-marriage coaching.
That's great. That's great. So for couples getting married today, what specific advice would you give them just in general? I mean, not necessarily looking for an officiant, but hey, like what would, as a pastor, as a human, what would your advice be for people getting married?
Well, there's two quick things. The first one, I do say hire a professional. And I know that's why we're in this industry, and I know, quote unquote, that's what I'm supposed to say. But for example, we did a wedding about 2 years ago, and one of the groomsmen came up to me and said, "Hey, I just got married last week, and the groom had gotten an online license so he could marry me and my wife." And he said it was fine, but he said, "I saw some things going through this process that you did that I wish he had done." So even though it was a close friend, sometimes the friends and family who do the ceremonies don't always catch all of the details that, let's say, a professional officiant, a pastor, or somebody like that would catch. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, and this is what I really emphasize throughout the process, there's a lot of stress involved. Sometimes couples are very anxious or nervous. You think about this, some of their biggest fears, such as standing up in front of people, public speaking, such as saying vows or repeating vows, are all coming to fruition on the biggest day of their life, which is their wedding day. So I try and help them relax throughout the process so they can focus on each other, be in the moment, and just enjoy the ceremony.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit. We'll talk about the business side of things. So for business in general, what would you say is working well for you as a business owner?
I would say this. Honestly, what we talked about before with the word of mouth, referrals, but the networking was huge. When you're a pastor at a church, you sort of have a built-in congregation that you're going to probably perform the ceremonies. But about 5.5 years ago, when my wife and I started doing this, we didn't have any connections to anyone in the wedding industry. So we just started meeting every photographer, wedding coordinator, florist, DJ that we could find, everybody in the Albuquerque, Santa Fe area where we're located.
Mhm.
And what happened is we began to develop this reputation of being people that would go out of our way to connect with other vendors. We always thought of ourselves as part of a bigger team, not just something that I have to have it a certain way and all of a sudden I'm at odds with a photographer. What I took it as is we're all on the same team to make this couple's day amazing. So that has been something huge. And I can honestly say, Shane, that we have had so many couples that come to us and say, you know what, when we booked our venue, you were in the top 1 or 2 officiants that they referred. And then when we booked our photographer, you were there. And then when we booked our DJ. And so when we hear that, we know that network is sort of working on our behalf. So we feel like we've really done a good job pouring into that side of the business. I go to all the networking events, even non-wedding associated ones, because again, with a pastoral background, I want to help pastor people. But as a wedding officiant, I want to be able to connect with people, even who are not in a wedding specific industry.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you said you went to a lot of different networking events. I was going to ask you, like, what was there something specific about your strategy to meet and connect with all the vendors in the area that you thought about and said, hey, this is what we need to do? I mean, was there a systematic process to this? Did you read some books? Was there, something that stuck out for you to like, this is my strategy, this is how I'm going to do it?
Well, I will say I am extroverted, so it does come a little bit natural to me. I like people. I like meeting people and getting to know them. But we did put a strategy into it. So we did find the different wedding. So there are local guides, of course, here and in other places that are typically, whether it's monthly or even quarterly, networking events that happen. So we would go to all of those. But every time we did a wedding, I would collect cards from all of the other vendors and I would follow up with them. Hey, it was great to work with you as a photographer. Let's grab coffee someday. Or, hey, it was great to work with you as a DJ. And so we tried to really systematically do it, both in the formalized networking events, but every wedding kind of following up. And so now, 5 years later, we actually have a pretty good connective base that way. But I will say this, the first couple of years, it's just a lot of hard work because you are meeting a lot of people and they don't know you. So they might
What's your agenda?
Right. They might think, oh, that's a nice guy, but they don't know, are you going to be professional? What if I refer you and you don't do a good job? So we try to always work on building the connections, not only with the couples, but also with the vendors and the wedding industry as a whole.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And it takes a long time, right, to build relationships and to develop, so it doesn't matter whether it's online or whether it's offline, right? It takes a long time to develop and build relationships. That's awesome. As a business, what would you say are your biggest challenges that you face outside of what's happening today, free today, right? What would you say are your biggest challenges?
That's a great question. About 3 years ago, so this would have been, roughly 2.5 to 3 years into what we were doing. We were doing about 75 to 80 weddings a year, and it was great, and it was a lot. And we realized that we did not want to keep up that schedule forever. And quite honestly, you can book almost every weekend, but then of course you're missing birthdays and your friends' weddings or graduations, or sometimes if you're not careful, you don't even book a vacation and all of a sudden you realize it's been a year and a half or two. And so we started to think about what is the challenge for us? How can we replicate what we do? So we started putting a plan of action into place about how to develop other concierge pastors. Because we're a nonprofit, we ordain and credential other pastors through our association. And then we provide a significant amount of training to allow them to do the same thing with the pre-marriage coaching, the weddings, and all of the things that go into that. So we have just recently brought on board, and I say recently, meaning in the past about 3 months,
Yeah.
4 other concierge pastors. So that's really started to help the challenges we were facing with almost being too busy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, that can happen pretty easily with anything, especially your own business. Um, I think that's good that you talked about, like, how do we replicate these things in a way that we can ease back a little bit, but yet
Yeah.
continue to find ways to generate revenue and then, support your business, right? Because even though you're a nonprofit, you still have to generate revenue to grow. You
Yeah.
still have to earn a profit and actually be able to spend that money in a way that helps you grow your nonprofit, right? I mean, how else do you do it, right?
Right. And that's part of what we also found too. I mentioned that 75 to 80 weddings. We wanted to be about half of that. So this year, I'm I'm not keeping true to my word because I'm already past half of that
Yeah.
in our bookings and everything that we have scheduled. But what's nice is with these other concierge pastors, for example, you take around here anyway, it's always sort of the last weekend or two of September. September 19th here is just the craziest weekend.
It's
But
slammed.
we have, yeah, 4 of our concierge pastors have weddings because you can only book yourself at one time during that day. So it has been a helpful thing to see how we can grow. But it is challenging because growth, even in and of itself, presents new challenges.
It
So,
does.
so I'm sure if
Yeah.
you ask me in a month, I'll probably give you some other ones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you have limited market, right? So it's not just,
Right.
okay, well, there's 5,000 weddings in your market, but how many people actually hire an officiant, right? Versus getting a
Exactly.
pastor to do it, or a friend to do it, or whatever. Okay. So if
Right.
that's 20%, right? So that's a smaller segment of the market. And then how do you make sure people use you as an officiant, right? Maybe that's not a priority for them, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of challenges as a business to grow those pieces of it that you may not be thinking about. You're just like, oh, there's 5,000 weddings, we'll get everybody. No, that's not the case.
I
Yeah,
know. I know. You hope, but you realize that's not true.
that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So last question: what is your best or worst wedding story you got for me?
Um, that's a great question too. There's always those, the funny ones where somebody, you tell people not to lock their knees. It's the middle of summer and it's hot and one of the groomsmen goes down. I mean, there's always kind of those things, but I think 2 of the most maybe memorable ones. There was one we love having dogs at weddings, and so this one couple, they had a handler who brought the dog in, one of their friends, and they wanted me to kind of say, if anybody would have any words of wisdom for the bride and groom, why don't you share it now? And the handler kind of gave the dog a command. So the dog spoke, barked a few times, kind of gave them some words of wisdom. People enjoyed that. But quite honestly, Shane, one of my favorite things to do is, again, we have a big international balloon fiesta every October here. Hundreds and hundreds of balloons, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands even of spectators who come into Albuquerque. So I get to do a lot of balloon weddings,
Nice.
and it's beautiful. You go up before it's dawn and the balloons are glowing, and then the sun rises over the mountains in the east, and it's just a great time to kind of say, I now pronounce you. I mean, it's a really powerful, moving moment. And so I'll give a little shout out to Rainbow Riders. They do most of these, but it's a great opportunity, and it's just a lot of fun to be up in a hot air balloon, kind of just floating along,
Sure.
not thinking about the cares of this world, but enjoying a beautiful wedding.
Yeah, that's awesome. Paul, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.
Hey, thanks. You too, Shane. Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Thanks, you too.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. I hope that you found it helpful. Please share it with other people. Also, if you're getting married or you work in the wedding industry, I would love to interview and share your information with other people. Send me a text, 520-399-8580, or shoot me an email at letschat@wedding.report.